nice to see everybody. I'm Rosemary Monahan, and I'm going to talk about a trip I took last summer to Turkey. Some of you may have seen the talk I gave last year. So I did 2 trips to Turkey last year. In the spring, I went to that part of Turkey in the southwest to look at spring blooming bulbs. And we had such a good time that a friend and I went back in end of July, beginning of summer, to what are called the Black Sea Mountains in northeastern Turkey. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So by plant hunting, we're not going to dig up plants, cut back plants, take seeds, bulbs, none of that. You're just there to take as many photographs as you want. Oh, that's a good idea. In Turkey, many of the plants we grow in our gardens, especially some of the spring bulbs, were collected from Turkey and other countries around the Mediterranean. So Turkey now has very strict regulations on not collecting any plants. So photographs, yes, plants, no. All right, let's see. Let me go back one second. So we flew into Istanbul in the upper left of the slide, and then we flew into Trabzon, which is right on the Black Sea. And from there, we set off into the mountains. And one of the things that was very different about this trip, in the spring, I went with a group organized through the North American Rock Garden Society, and there were about 16 of us on the trip. This time, it was just my friend Ellen from Shrewsbury, our botanical tour guide, and me just tooling around in a car. And it was just, it was very special, just because nobody else signed up for the trip. So you'll see pictures of them. And the first place we went up into, we were in the mountains the whole time. Trabzon was very hot, as you might expect at the end of July, right down at sea level. As soon as you get up into the mountains, it was lovely and cool. And we had temperatures in the 70s most of the time. And the first valley we went up into is the Anzur Valley. And I didn't know this before, but it's very famous because the world's most expensive honey comes from the Anzur Valley. You'll see a lot of pictures of beehives. And so we're winding up along streams, and you see some houses up there on the hills. One of the reasons this is so floristically rich is these meadows are grazed by cows. I was surprised it wasn't sheep, but it's mostly cows. They're not mechanically harvested. They're not fertilized, so the density of herds is very low. So just very beautiful flora and mostly flora, a little bit of fauna. And the Turks who manage the herds move from villages lower down up closer to these grazing areas. So there are summer villages and winter villages. And of course, there's road construction in the summer. So that was the first thing we came to. They were putting a drainage pipe under the road. And this is the condition of most of the roads that we were on. I was glad our botanical tour guide, Başak Gardner, was driving. But so it takes a long time, just like road construction here. That's my friend Ellen. But one thing about people who are interested in plants, they can find plants to look at anywhere. So that's Ellen and Başak, our tour guide. So we're already off and running, looking at some of the plants. And all along that stream on the way up were beautiful plants. And those of you who garden will recognize some of these plants. So clary sage is something I've grown in my garden. The leaves are very distinctive because they smell like sweat, which is not the most pleasant smell, but beautiful plants. Bellflowers, many of us grow campanulas in our garden, and some of the ones there were very tall. And I just put this in because of the spider with the red marking on it, perfectly camouflaged on that flower. So all through these mountains, there are these small summer villages. And this may not actually be a summer village, this may be a year-round village. And mosques are very common, even in small villages. The minaret is where the call for prayer comes 5 times a day. So there's an imam who's based in that tiny little village. So I loved hearing the call to prayer. It was very evocative whenever we would hear it. So, of course, this is the village where a lot of the honey comes to be packaged and processed. So it was the previous summer's honey that I bought, because they were just starting to go out and collect the honey when we were there. And guess how much a bottle that big cost, if anyone wants to take a guess?
$20.
$45. And that was last year's honey. It was really expensive. It was really good. But it's not like I'm going to be ordering it online. It wasn't that much different. But
Still funny taste.
there was a little bit. It was very floral. We also bought some chestnut honey, chestnut flower honey, and that was really different. Very sort of bitter undertones, and that was a bargain at like $30 a jar. Anyway, it felt like a drug deal, because I was paying these older women in lira, Turkish lira, which is very devalued against the dollar. So I'm handing over wads of cash just to get up to $45. It did feel like an illicit buy. And this is what the mountains there look like. As we read about over-tourism in Europe and locals being so mad at the tourists, clogging their cities that they're shooting at them with water pistols. Well, if you want to go to a place that is very untouristy, this area is. There's very little tourism infrastructure. So the nights we were up in the Anzer Valley during the day, we stayed at this one hotel, and it was literally the only hotel for a very long distance. And it was interesting. Most of the other people at the hotel were either from Saudi Arabia or Iran, because they're such hot countries. And so they were able to get up into the mountains where it was much cooler at night. So these meadows are just filled with wildflowers. In the foreground, you can see a plant that's very common in American gardens. So that is a lady's mantle, Alchemilla mollis. And as you get closer, you can see the meadows are just a tapestry of all these gorgeous colors. Many of us grow perennial geraniums, not the pelargoniums. This one I grow in my garden. Gorgeous little gentians, which would be blooming just about now for us. So we were in the mountains, and it was cooler there. More geraniums, just a close-up. And then the closer you get to water, you see orchids. They tend to grow in more marshy areas. So these are not the orchids that we buy in grocery stores, those big, huge plants. There are plenty of orchids here that grow here as well, but they're much more diminutive and very beautifully colored. So here's the first view of beehives. We'll see a close-up in a second. So I believe the structure on the left is where they would dry things. And then those are all beehives there. And the reason you see the tarp around the fencing around the outside is there are bears in these mountains. We saw them one night, brown bears. And of course, what are they going for? They're going for the honey. So the Turks were amazingly imaginative in how they protected their beehives. I don't know if they were always successful. It looks like a bear could get through that, in my opinion. So more photographs of gorgeous plants. And you see what I mean? It just looks like a tapestry of all these gorgeous different colors. More campanulas. And some of the plants, this is very short, this is probably a 3 or 4 inch tall plant, just hug the rocks and end up being like veils over the rocks. And there's that lady's mantle. Does anyone here grow it?
I've seen that.
Yeah, I bet, yeah. I saw Meg raise her hand. Anyway, one of the things about lady's mantle, when it rains or there's dew, those cupped leaves hold it, and the leaf sort of glistens with this beautiful water that it holds. This is a very rare campanula. And our botanist, Başak, comes from a very botanically oriented family. Her dad is actually the botanist at the Istanbul Botanical Garden. He's the head botanist there, and he's rewriting the flora of Turkey. I think her mother had something to do in the botanical field, and her sister's a very well-known botanical artist. So she knew her plants. This is, when people talk about rock gardening, they often talk about plants that grow in crevices of rocks. And this is a wonderful genus of plants, Corydalus. I don't know if there's a common name for it, but blue-flowered ones are coveted by people all over the world, and they're just in among the rocks here, just looking lovely and happy. So more views of these mountains. There's very active forestry. You'll see photographs later. I'm not sure that that's, it looks like the mountain on the far side is too steep, but the Turkish government, I don't know if it's federal or provincial, does a lot of work planting, especially evergreens for timber, and they manage for insects as well. We would see signs that, experimental treatments for spruce budworm or something. Of course, I couldn't read a word in Turkish, but that's what Başak told us. And there are just roads like this everywhere through the mountains. Sometimes scary, sometimes not. So another variation on how to keep bears away from your honey. And then this looked like I don't know if it was a shipping container, but you could see the mesh on the top so the bees can get out and get to the plants. And all the chartreuse you see are those lady's mantle plants. Just another view of that same shipping container. Delphiniums, some of us have grown delphiniums in the past. There are a number of different species there. So this is a fairly short one. We are at the tail end of spring blooming poppies, but nice to see some orange there. And the little pink flower is just ground hugging thyme, the same kind of thyme we use in cooking. And the larger green leaves are some sort of berry, like blackberry or raspberry or something. So this is one of the summer villages. I think this is the same village where I showed the mosque from. And I don't know if this is true or not, but one Turkish woman told us that Turks are descended from a nomadic people, and they were used to, moving their settlements. So the outside of their dwellings doesn't matter as much as the inside of the dwellings. So the summer villages are definitely a little on the ramshackle side. So it was sort of interesting.
What's the yellow flower, Rosemary?
So that's a mullein, a verbascum georgicum. You'll see other pictures of it later. We see mullins, verbascums along the sides of highways. They're those big gray or green furry basal foliage, and then you'll see a yellow stalk coming up. So more beehives, and we would see occasionally little buildings like that one. So I think the folks who follow the herds, who move the herds, sometimes if they're too far away from their summer village, they'll stay over and camp overnight in some of these little villages. Some of those in the little buildings like that. Mostly the herders were either on foot, and all the cows had bells. It was fun to hear them, sort of like Switzerland, hear them coming. So the herders were either on foot mostly, but some on horseback. We never saw anyone on a mechanized thing like a three-wheeler or anything like that. So still doing herding the way they've done for a very long time there. So I'd never seen this species of delphinium, very, very beautiful white with that little splotch of blue. And gentians were very common at this time, and the most intense blue color. And lots of bees. So Stachys lamb's ear is in that same genus of plants. This is a variety with these beautiful, deep, purpley pink flowers. It was very common through all of the meadows. And then this is something many people grow, these hens and chicks, and that's a flower of the hens and chicks. And just sitting on top of these rocks, looking beautiful, along with all the lichens. That's just a side view of the flowers of it. So that's Bashak and my friend Ellen. And we had hiked up from where you could see a settlement at the base of the hill. And one of the things that was interesting is we would see Turks coming up into the mountains for picnics. So around the lake, there were several families that were having picnics. So we weren't the only ones up there in the meadows. Although we were probably the only ones who were looking down like this the whole time. Just heading up further into the mountains. So some gentians never open. And so pollinators get in by sort of buzzing at the base. These are semi-open, but it's just, you can see why the bees are so happy in this part of Turkey. They just, the colors, how do they manage to put themselves together in such tasteful combinations? And this is a vining plant. And just some places when you would see one plant, you would see hundreds of acres of it. It would just cover the whole mountainside. Obviously, this is perfect growing conditions for this honeysuckle. And we were, as I said, there's no tourism infrastructure, so we weren't stopping into a cafe for lunch, that's for sure. So we'd eat out of the back of our vehicle. Another plant many of us grow in our gardens. This photograph is a tiny bit out of focus, but I thought the color was beautiful, and it looked gorgeous with these bellflowers. More geraniums. And this gives you a sense, so that is an area where I think the forestry department has been actively planting. But you can see there are houses scattered all through that area. So I am unclear on what else people do besides herding, beekeeping. You'll see a little bit of road construction later. I don't know. Some of these may be family homes that they keep and come visit during the hot summers. But you can see some of these slopes we were on were pretty steep. This is a plant that many people who have rock gardens try to grow. This beautiful little round blue-headed globularia. I've tried it. It has not liked Stow as well as it liked Turkey. St. John's wort. This is a plant I'd never heard of before, but those seed heads, those spiky seed heads, are just so interesting. And almost strawberry-like leaves, but definitely not a strawberry. More bellflowers. So this is a plant that probably a lot of people are familiar with, digitalis, foxgloves. So this is where the heart medicine digitalin comes from I don't actually know if it's the leaves or the root of digitalis. So in this picture, those of you who are up front can probably see 1 million different lines on this photograph. Those are all cow paths. You can see them more clearly going across that sandy bit. So these mountains have been grazed for who knows how long. And I don't know why the cows don't follow the same path, but they all seem to be making their own paths. So here was disaster. So when we met Bashak in Trabzon and she picked up this car, the check engine light was already on. So we had to go to the dealer before we could head up. Then when we were up on one of those very remote roads, suddenly there was this terrible noise and it was clear something had fallen off the car. So we stopped and went out, and there was a bolt lying on the road behind us that had been bent in a 90-degree angle. Bolts are not supposed to be at a 90-degree angle. But Bashak was very, let's just go on, it'll be fine, I'm sure it'll be fine. My friend Ellen and I are like, let's go down. So we went down, got to a paved road, and there was an even more terrible noise, and it was a flat tire. And being a rental car, of course, there was no tire iron. So even if we had a tire iron, I don't know if we could have undone, when they put them on with those pneumatic things. It's impossible to get those in. Luckily, 2 guys from the highway department stopped by, and they had a tire iron, and they got ours off. And when they pulled the tire off, what you could see is the whole brake mechanism was loose. That's where the bolt came from. So Boschak was like, oh, they'll take the car and fix it. And Ellen and I are like, we don't want to ever get in that car again. So the dealership that was about 4 hours away came and gave us a Mercedes SUV. So that was a definite upgrade. I'd never been in one before. So good riddance to that terrible vehicle. Sedums, many of us grow sedums in our gardens. And this was a plant that the bees just loved. This is another plant where there were thousands of acres of it, this big Cephalaria gigantea. And I think this guy had more beehives than any other place I saw. You can see them all around. And what the photograph doesn't show is across the road he had a whole bunch more beehives. So I'm sure he's making a lot of money if they're charging $45. Mm-hmm. So there was a fair amount of road construction. I think President Erdogan has been investing in road infrastructure throughout many parts of Turkey. It will probably be to the detriment of some of the villages, that get left behind when the roads bypass them. But they're going on. So this is a mine to mine gravel for the road construction. So anyway, I was glad to be there before the area changes a whole lot. So there's that verbascum. So people can probably have seen things like that along our roads. Asters, another common plant for many of us. So this is probably the highest we got. This was probably about 7,000 feet. And this was a valley with 7 lakes in it. And people were hiking down and camping along some of those lakes. But still, the number of people you see in any of these areas was very small. There was still snow on the ground in some places. Just spectacular mountains. This is a plant, it's called catchfly because the flowers are sticky, and I think insects do get caught on them. They're not carnivorous, so I don't know what advantage there is for the plant, but they do catch plants. So pinks, dianthus are probably a familiar plant. And really, a lot of the plants we grow come from this part of the world that were collected at one point. Boschak said that Turkey now, as I said, is very serious about making sure people are not collecting plants. And there had been a famous case of people who were caught trying to get out of the country with a lot of, bulbs or roots or something like that, and were made an example of in terms of the fine. They might have even been imprisoned, which is good. We shouldn't be doing things like that. Now, this is a little hard to see, but you can maybe see a little bit of a blue cast on that hill. That's a river of forget-me-nots that were just spectacular. This was a plant across a pretty steep slope of scree. Scree is just loose rock that's very hard to walk on. I hate walking on scree. But Boschak said, oh, there's this violet that you must come and see. I thought, I don't want to ruin my knees for some violet, but I did. And I did not ruin my knees, thankfully. And just more lovely plants, more bees. So we went down an elevation a little bit to a town of Rees. This is the only place where we actually saw sort of what we would consider tourists. And that's a traditional bridge there that you see the people standing on, which tells you something about spring runoff in this area. So all the bridges the traditional bridges in that area are all built like that. Because these are, you saw how steep the mountains are when they're covered in snow and the snow melts. And so Rees is where Boschak's parents, her mom and her dad, grew up. And so they still have a house in this teensy little village up above Rees. There were probably 50 houses in the village. And there was a little tiny town square. And there were, older women having a knitting circle in the middle of the square. And since this is a talk for the Council on Aging, I had to point out the walker. It's very appropriate for a Council on Aging talk. And this is what she was knitting, very skilled. But they were thrilled to see Basha because she spent every summer there with her mom when she was growing up. So it was a little bit of a homecoming. And this was in the village. And the upper part is where you would dry things, hay, for your animals or things like that. And these round structures are to make it harder for rodents, mice, rats, whatever, to try and get up and over to whatever's being dried up above. And we happened to be there during tea harvesting season. You don't think of Turkey as being an important tea producer, but it is. And tea comes from camellia plants, the flowering things. All those little roundy plants, those are all tea plants that have been sheared for their leaves. And here's a woman who is harvesting. So from her shears, then the leaves go into the bag she's got there. It's a lot of ferns and other things mixed in there. And then all through these mountains, we saw these big bags of tea leaves that had been harvested. Trucks would pick them up and take them off to be processed, dried, smoked, whatever they're going to do with them. Turkish tea was really good. I will say that. Even better with Anzur honey. So this was the view from one of the places we stayed, this very small guest house. But just a lovely atmospheric clouds at that time. But there were no screens on the wraparound porch on the inn. So you were battling with yellow jackets and other things in the morning when they would serve honey. So we were right on the border with the country of Georgia at this point. So this is a Georgian mosque. Borders change over time. So there are villages like this one where most of a lot of the language still is Georgian, and there's Georgian architecture and mosques. And likewise, in Georgia, there are still Turkish-speaking villages. So you can see same idea, except this is all in wood, the minaret, and there's a loudspeaker there in case there's any laggards getting to the mosque. And this was the most beautiful painted interior of a mosque. It was very small, but all of this is carved wood and then painted so beautifully. And the carpet shows in what direction Mecca is. So the point is where people would kneel to worship. And this tiny little mosque in this tiny little village had all of this. You can see the carving. I don't even know if there are people alive today who do that kind of carving, let alone the gorgeous painting. This was also the time when hazelnuts were being harvested. So that's a hazelnut flower. And we grow hazels, Turkish hazels, actually, in our garden. And for the last 3 weeks, the nuts have been ripe. And in each of our trees, which are pretty big, there must be 100 squirrels in each tree. The trees look like they're alive with squirrels. I didn't see any squirrels here. This was the only day when we had sort of drizzle all day, but that doesn't keep, people who are interested in plants from looking at them. And what they were looking at up on that hillside were rhododendrons. Oh. So again, so many of these plants are familiar to us. And this is a very common plant out in the Rockies. Some people may have seen that. And at fireweed, I think it comes up often after fires come through an area. Just gorgeous. They're about my height. And this was a white variety. So my friend Ellen used to run a plant nursery, was one of the best mail order plant nurseries in the country. And she has an eye for a plant that's different. Even I could pick out that this is different. You know, a 5-foot tall plant that's white when everything else is pink. But, you know, in the old days, that's what she would do. She would raise a lot of plants from seed in her nursery and then select out the very best or most interesting ones. Goat's beard, another plant many of us grow. Beautiful color combinations. And the white are elderberries, sambucus, something that for us was blooming along wetlands, along roadsides here in New England. Different, I think it's a different species, but again, so those are the cows that were keeping the meadows nice and open. Oregano, I saw Mary had a photograph out there of something on bees on oregano. And this was another place we stayed. This particular area is called the Little Switzerland of Turkey, and the houses, you know, sort of looked like a little bit like Switzerland. This was a place where we did see Turkish families coming for a little bit of a vacation in those cabins. Not many other places. This is the area where we did see brown bears. The only restaurant in the area had a little tiny fish hatchery, and they would serve trout from their hatchery, but there was also a stream at the bottom. And when the dogs started barking, the waiters would all shine flashlights down into the little river valley, and the bears would look up. And anyway, that's the only time I saw them. I think I'm glad I didn't see them when we were hiking along. Different kinds of onions. This was a very delicate pink dianthus. Those of you who have grown dianthus know it has a very spicy smell, like a clove-like smell. And if something's growing on a rock face, it's very easy to sniff, and you don't have to get down on your hands and knees to have a good scent of the fragrance. I would love to grow a plant like that. Just gorgeous. So this gives you a little more close-up of our summer village, and you can see what I mean. It's a little bit ramshackle, casual, very much a working environment. And more cows, elderberries, campanulas. So aconitum is the blue flower there, and paired with the pink fireweed. So monkshood is the common name for that plant, and it's extremely poisonous if you eat it. It's not. I grow them; it's not a problem if you're growing them. But anyone who reads British mystery novels, murder mystery novels, monkshood is often used to kick off, you know, the bad person in the novel. I wouldn't recommend eating it, I'll tell you that.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yes, more sedums. This is a plant I grow in my garden, but the ones I grow are sort of a pale pink, and this is a lovely dark pink. And it goes well with so many other things. Just a close-up of the monkshood. And I think there's sort of a cap over where the fertile parts of the flower are. I think that's how it got its name. There were a couple of vans of people harvesting these straw flowers, these everlastings. I think they grow, you know, you buy them as dried flowers, or they're often in wreaths. So I think that's what they were harvesting them for. But a pretty little plant. This is the only beehives I saw where they actually had a solar panel and electric fence around it. And here we're right on the border with Georgia, and there are a lot of military everywhere on the border, sort of in the towns and wandering around. That's a border facility that you see just at the edge. Boschek had told us that, especially in this area, we should always have our passports on us. Both, they don't want people collecting plants, and they don't want people, you know, doing nefarious things on the border. So the only place we were way off in a meadow, and we could see a road up above, and we saw a police car stop and with the flashing lights. And we could see them looking at us, you know, with binoculars. And either they decided we looked harmless, Or we were too far away through a wet meadow that they just finally drove on after watching us for a while. But we were ready. We had our passports with us. Another delphinium, delphiniums, geraniums, silenes. Another plant I'd never heard of before, but it's just a beautiful, I would grow that in my garden. More orchids when we were down in marshy areas. And this was an interesting place. This is where the police were looking down at us. So there were 3 species or 3 different kinds of gentians in these meadows. So these are what they call bottle gentians that don't open up, and bees sort of figure out somehow how to get in there. Very shiny leaves. They were very distinctive looking. Other aconitum. Oh, well, I'll show you why I was talking about that gentian in a second. But doesn't that look like somebody in a garden? I mean, that's what it felt like in all the meadows we were in. More cows. This is a plant that was, when you'd see it, it would be in huge abundance, just covering acres. This was a shop window. The shop was closed. Not that I necessarily wanted to stop in, but we did not know what they would sell these for. Do you give it as a wedding gift?
Wedding cake topper.
Wedding cake, but these look like they were made of cement. It would go right through the cake. I don't know what they were for. And then and cow statues up above, dogs. I don't know. Another plant familiar to many of us, hollyhocks. And this gives you a sense of the mix of evergreens, largely grown for timber, and open areas with valleys. But some of the hills we were on were quite steep. We really did not want to put something down and have it roll down to the bottom of the meadow. Just gorgeous, brightly colored flowers. I do have a video of there were 3 people, I think, herding them. So I have a video that has the cowbells in it, but it freezes up the computer, so I can't show you that. But that was one of the larger herds we saw going through.
Why was that called Sahara National Park?
No idea. I mean, it does not look like the Sahara. I don't know. So some of this, a lot of this Başak would translate for us. Turkish is a really hard language for most people to be able to speak. Her husband is British. He's lived in Turkey for 15 or 20 years. He spends a lot of his time leading botanical tour trips around the world. He has never learned Turkish. And they have kids. Anyway, it's complicated for them to. I mean, Başak's English is perfect, but still. And Başak at one point said that for Turkish people, it's easier for them to learn Japanese than English. And I don't know what the connection might be of the structure of the language. So most places, we didn't see that much infrastructure for the herds. This is the only place where we saw a watering trough, just spring-fed, because there's so many streams and rivers up in these mountains that it's not needed in most places. We're back to the gentians. So this is, in this one meadow, there was this blue gentian, there was a beautiful yellow gentian, and there's actually a hybrid between the two. So I don't think this has been given its own specific name, but anyway, just interesting. In this one meadow, you see all 3 of these different plants. Meadow sweet, another plant many of us grow in our gardens. More aconitums. This was a very rare bellflower we found on this one rock face. We were doing a lot of scrambling up, sort of along sides of roads and rock faces. And growing with it was this sea holly. It's not called sea holly because we're anywhere near the sea, but it has these beautiful bracts, which are the flat bits around the actual flower itself. And some of them had these beautiful deep blue or bright blue color on them, just lovely. More asters, more bellflowers. And this is the last stop we made when we were botanizing. And let me tell you, this was steep. This was one place where I didn't even want to put my pack down. And that's one of the plants we saw there. It's a very prickly plant. No wonder it's called prickly thrift. And it forms these beautiful cushions and lovely pink flowers. But you can see what I mean about steep. So that was me. Can't see how steep it was, but it was really steep behind me. And then we came down in elevation. So this was a lake. I've forgotten what they call these lakes, but there's some sort of mineral, white mineral that is deposited around the edge of the lake. I don't think it's salt. It's maybe some kind of a salt. Anyway, this is a place there were a lot of water birds, as you might imagine, in this area. In the village there, they were stacking up manure that they'd made into these bricks, and I think they used those to heat houses during the course of the winter. So the last town we stayed in before we headed back to Istanbul is Kars. And Kars means snow in Turkish. That's what the snowflake is. So there's ski resorts in this area and snowmobile and stuff like that. Interesting. So this was from the castle at night. And we stayed in the Hotel Chaltikov. So this area is right on the, close to the border with Georgia. And Russians had occupied this area, I think in the 1800s. So this had been the home of a very wealthy Russian family, later turned into something, for the Russian administration, and now it's a hotel. But borders change. The very last place we went to is literally on the border with Armenia. When I said Kars was on the Georgia border, it's on the close to the Armenian border. And this is, I can remember plant names. I have no memory for anything historical, so I'm just going to tell you what I wrote down. So this was a ruined and uninhabited city right on the border with Armenia. It was a wealthy medieval city and capital of the Armenian kingdom between 981 and 1045 AD. Is undergoing reconstruction, but this is big. There were up to 100,000 people in this town that they see. And some of the architecture here, they think, may predate some of the Byzantine architecture that you see in the great cathedrals of Europe. It was sacked by the Mongols in 1268, and then an earthquake happened that further do it. So it's surrounded on three sides by a very steep river valley. So the land across the valley is Armenia. And you may not be able to see it, but there's an Armenian flag flying over there. And people probably know Turks and Armenians do not get along ever since the Armenian genocide. So this is one of the buildings that's there. And the Armenians are actually strip mining across the way. I think it's a statement about Turkey and people on the Turkish side looking over. But you can sort of see that this may be a precursor to some of the cathedrals that you see. And this is one of the stores. We saw almost no stores, but we went to Kars because both Başak and her mother, who joined us, wanted to buy fruits and nuts and cheeses to take home. Just beautiful stores. And then I'll just show a couple pictures. This is just another 3 or 4 pictures. Ellen and I went to Istanbul at the very end. We'd been there in the spring and loved it, and so wanted to go back. Mostly to see this. This is the Mosque of Suleiman the Magnificent. So like the Blue Mosque in Hagia Sophia, it's enormous and gorgeous. There's always a washing area outside the mosque. You're supposed to wash your arms at least up to the elbows and wash your feet before going in to pray. And just like other mosques we had seen, they hang these ostrich eggs in the chandeliers because apparently the smell of ostrich eggs repels spiders, so they don't have to be dusting spider webs up in these. We saw them in all the larger mosques. Beautiful gardens and seating area. So this is Iznik, is a town in Turkey that's very famous for these gorgeous tiles, all in blues. These are very old, and that's the man himself, Suleiman the Magnificent, is in there. And that was our last night. We stayed in a hotel. I know I've suggested it to Vicky, with a view right over the Bosporus, which is gorgeous. And so that's it. I just signed up to do a trip to this area of Turkey next May. So maybe if people like these botanical things, I'll talk about that next year. All right, that's it.
Are you going with the same guide?
Yes.
Oh, well.
Actually, her husband, but yes. Anyway, well, thank you. So if somebody could get the lights. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer. Any questions? Nope. All right, dismissed.
Could you tell where the border was? Was it marked?
Could we tell where the border was? We didn't want to get too close to the
That's what I was
border.
worried about. Would you inadvertently go across the border?
I think there are fences with Armenia. You can't cross by land from Turkey into Armenia or vice versa. There are flights you can take from one country into the next. I am 100% sure you would know.
You would know if you were going.
Yeah, Georgia, I bet not, because the borders are open with Georgia. But we got, within a mile, or in the case of when we were in Ani, we were right on looking down into the river valley that separated. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Okay, yes.
The areas that you were traveling, are most of the roads not paved?
We were going up into the mountains, and those roads were not paved, but there were paved roads connecting the major, towns. And then there are these big highways that are being built with the gravel that we saw. And big tunnels being built. It costs a lot of money to do that, and I'm not sure why they're spending so much of their money on that. Not for me to say.
Did you feel safe? I mean, if you didn't have a guide?
I would never travel in this area without a guide because no one speaks English or any other language I might have a hope of. But we felt totally safe. I will say that the Turks in this area aren't crazy about foreigners, because their impression is that some people coming, to get away from the heat and enjoy their mountains, leave trash behind. And we did see trash in some places along, rivers where people would picnic. Now, is that all from people from away, or were some Turks, leaving? I mean, people are people everywhere. Some people are good about picking up after themselves, and some are not. But it felt totally safe. I just wouldn't, if you needed help of some kind, your car breaks down, how do you communicate? So safe, yes. Communication, not as easy. Yeah.
Can I just ask one other
Yeah.
question? How did you arrange, like this, what's her name, Basra?
Bashak, yeah.
Basha. How did she arrange all the places where you stayed and like meals
Yep.
and all that? So this was
That's
kind of.
that's their business, is they run a botanical tour company. So you arrange to fly in, and after that they have already booked the hotels and all that kind of stuff. If anyone, they also do butterfly tours. They do botanical tours and butterfly tours, and the name of their company is Vera Natura. You can look on their website, and they run them from South America to Australia to China, every place. Very well-run company. So, all right, thanks.
Wow, that was wonderful, Rosemary.
All right, thank you.